Hi there, today I'm going to set out to demystify the person is pushed to Marketo trigger. I'm going to clear up what it is, why you might want to use it, and I'll show you how to use this trigger. So a lot of people incorrectly assume that the person is pushed to Marketo trigger will fire when a lead syncs from your CRM. This is not the case. This trigger will only fire when the push lead to Marketo API call is made. So if we follow this link here, it'll take us to the Marketo REST API docs, where we can see the API request that needs to be made in order for this trigger to fire. So in this request here, we can see that we need to specify an input array, and this contains all the fields that we want to update on a lead. And this API request will upsert a lead. So that means that it will either update an existing lead if it finds it, or if it does not find the lead, then it will create a new lead with the field values that you specify here. We can also see that there is a lookup field, and this can be chosen by you. It can be a person's email address, their lead ID, their phone number, whatever you want. The source and reason are optional field values, as well as the lookup field. And I know that because it says that right here. The lookup field, source, and reason parameters are optional. However, the program name and input parameters are required. And this program name is the program that the person will be associated with when this API call is made. So I'll jump back to the blog post here for a second. So when we specify the program name, this is the program that the person will be added to. So we can see later on, and I'll show you how to do this, when we make the API request and we specify the program name as this 00 person is pushed to Marketo, when we make the request, we can see in the activity log that the person will change from not in program to member of this program. And as I mentioned before, the source and reason parameters are optional. And you can use these as constraints on the person is pushed to Marketo trigger and the person was pushed to Marketo filter. So I'll show you what that looks like in Marketo. So we can use that as constraints here. We can specify the source and the reason, and we can do the same for the filter. We can specify the source and the reason here. And one example of where we might want to use this, as I mentioned in the blog post here, is if we have multiple lead capture events making push lead to Marketo API requests, and you want each request for each event to go through a different smart campaign within the same program, then you can use the source and reason constraints to do this. So what I mean by this is all three of these smart campaigns exist within the same program. However, if we want a specific person is pushed to Marketo API request to go through a certain smart campaign, we can use these constraints to do that. So when the request is made here, anytime the person is pushed to Marketo API request is made and the program that is specified is this program, then the person will come through this smart campaign. And in this case, I just do a simple change data value on a dummy field. Or if you want to be more specific, we can say anytime the API request is made and the program specified is this program, but the source is channel 1, then come through this smart campaign. Or we can be even more specific again and say anytime the API request is made and this program is specified and this source and this reason are specified, then come through here. And in this example, I just set the person's source to channel 1 and their source detail to form fill. So this is an example of how you can use different sources and reasons with the same program value to have different API requests go through different smart campaigns in Marketo. Okay, so jumping back to the blog post here, I'm going to talk a bit about how you can do lead association with the person is pushed to Marketo API request. So you can track a person's web behavior in Marketo by installing the Marketo Munchkin JavaScript on your site. And this places a Marketo cookie in the user's browser so that all of their web page behavior like visits and clicks can be associated with this cookie and tracked in Marketo. And if a person is anonymous and they do one of these things, they click on a link within a tracked Marketo email, they fill out a Marketo form, or we make one of these API requests to associate the person's cookie with their lead ID. If they do one of these three things, then the person's web behavior, while anonymous, will be associated with that person's lead ID. And you can see these docs here for more information on lead tracking in Marketo, like how you can embed the Munchkin code, the Munchkin behavior, and the transition from anonymous to known leads. So if you have a non-Marketo lead capture event, for example, you have a non-Marketo form, whenever a lead gets created, you want to use the push lead to Marketo API request to get this information into Marketo, and where you also capture the person's cookie, and then where you want to associate this cookie with the person, you have two options depending on what you want to do. If you want to associate prior anonymous activity with the newly created lead, then do not specify the cookie, that is the Marketo token attribute in the input parameter. Instead, make the push lead to Marketo API request first to create the lead, and then call the associate lead API request to associate the captured cookie with the new lead ID that is returned from the response of the push lead to Marketo API request. However, if you want to create a new lead with no activity history, then you can simply specify the cookie attribute, that is the Marketo token attribute, in the input parameter as shown below. Okay, so now let's see how we can make the push lead to Marketo API request from the free API testing tool called Postman. If it's your first time using Postman or your first time making Marketo API requests, then I recommend you check out the Marketo API crash course, which will introduce you to the Marketo API and guide you through making your first Marketo API requests. And you can also check out the Marketo API Quick Start Guide to get a head start. Okay, so let's go into Postman quickly and I'll show you what this looks like. Okay, so in Postman, we know that we're making a post request to this endpoint, and we know that by checking out the API docs that I showed earlier on in this video. And then I just copied over the example body that is in those API docs, and then I just modified certain things, like I changed the program name to be a program in my Marketo instance. I specified a source, a reason. I'm using email as the lookup field, and I'm using tyrant@theworkflowpro.com as the email. And then I left all these four values here from country to lead score the exact same as was given in the API docs. And this base URL might make sense to you at the moment, and I highly recommend checking out the Marketo API Quick Start Guide to understand what's going on here. Before we make this request, we need to get our authorization first, and again, check out the Marketo API Quick Start Guide to understand this. So we get our authorization, we hit send, and then all of this information will be sent to Marketo, and we get a success true response, which tells us that this lead ID, which corresponds to this email address here, was successfully updated. So now I'm going to show you what this looks like within the Marketo activity log. Okay, so within the Marketo activity log now, we can see that the push person to Marketo activity has taken place. So we can see the lookup field name was email, which we know, and the lookup field value was tyrant@theworkflowpro.com, and we can see the source is channel 1 and the reason is event. And then we can see all the change data values that have taken place according to what we specified in the body of the request. And then we can also see that the person, their program status has changed from not in program to member of the 00 person is pushed to Marketo program that I specified in the body of the API request. And let's take a look now at which smart campaigns they went through. So you will remember at the start of this video that I showed you these 3 smart campaigns. So we can see that this smart campaign was triggered because the program name is 00 push to Marketo. And that will change dummy from null to all channels. And we can see that here. And then this other API request will fire this other smart campaign will fire when the program name is person is pushed to Marketo and the source is channel 1, which in this case it is, and it will update dummy 2 to channel 1. And again, we see this in the activity log. And then we'll notice that the final smart campaign did not fire. And the reason for this is because we specify the reason must be form fill. However, when we made this post request in Postman, we specified the reason to be event. So that is why this final smart campaign here did not trigger, whereas the previous two did. And the final thing I want to show you in the activity log is just what the activity detail looks like for one of these activities. So we click in here, we can see that the website field was changed from theworkflowpro.com to www.brexit.com. The reason and source for web service API, and we can see that the API method name was push lead to Marketo. So that's how we know that this activity was due to the push lead to Marketo API request. And now going back to the blog post here, I'll show you how you can transition from making the push lead to Marketo API request in Postman to making it in code. And Postman actually makes this super simple. All we need to do in Postman to get the code for this API request in a few different programming languages is click this code icon here on the right hand side, and then we can see that there are a lot of programming languages here available. So if you go, let's say curl, it gives us the curl code to make this request. If we click Python, which happens to be my favorite programming language, using the request library, it gives us the code for this. So then all you have to do is copy and paste this code into your script, and then you can press play and the API request will be made successfully just as it was in Postman. And that's all there is to it. I hope I've been able to demystify the person is pushed to Marketo trigger for you. And now you understand how to fire this trigger using the push lead to Marketo API request from either Postman or code. And since you are interested in this advanced feature and the Marketo API, I recommend you check out the Marketo API crash course, the Marketo API quick start guide, and the Marketo bulk API quick start guide, so that you can get a head start and get up to date with the Marketo API very quickly. And then if you have any of these FAQs, you can check out the bottom of this blog post here. And as always, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. And if you want to see more content like this in the future, then please subscribe.